phew, I was like trying to find the mute button because as soon as I shared, the thing disappeared to a different screen, which is confusing. Are you guys seeing like a mute stop video and stuff like that at the top of my slides, or is that just me? Okay, that's
just you.
Okay, sorry, I'm super nervous. Apologies. Right, so hello everyone. It's another VN conference. I'm super pleased to be here. Everybody who has seen me express my enthusiasm for the past, I don't know how many days, and it's all culminated in this moment when we do this talk. So it's about character arcs, and I will kick off with talking about what they are and why you should care. So character arcs are when characters go on an inner journey of change, and this change can either happen within them, or that's the change that they can affect in other people. And the reason you should care about this is that if you want to power your stories with emotions, then they are a really wonderful tool to cause the player to feel a whole bunch of feels. So before I kick off, I want to share a little story about myself. When I was a budding artist, writer, I was extremely stubborn. I tried to do plotting. It did not work for me. I preferred to just sit down and write whatever came into my mind, following whatever the characters wanted to do. And that, was sort of fine when you're doing sort of short stories and stuff like that. But the moment I started to work in games and I was writing interactive stories, what I found was that I would write one branch and a branch off the branch and a branch off that branch, because that's where my mind just took me. And before you knew it, I was completely out of my depth and making something that could never be finished. So I turned to books. I read a lot of books about plotting because I thought, well, there's so many people who know how to plot, so it must work from some perspective. I just need to find the one method that works for me. I tried everything. I did not succeed. However, I did come across a book called Creating Character Arcs by Kay Wyland, which I very much recommend if this is a topic that you find interesting. And that is what led me to where I am now, which is that I actually apply a method based on that book now to kind of create structure for my stories, and well, I hope deliver more kind of stories that tug more at the heartstrings. Right, so just as a disclaimer, my way of working with character arcs is not the same as Kay Wyland. So if you're familiar with her work and you think everything I'm doing wrong, that's fine. Just do it the way that suits you best. I've picked the bits from it that kind of work for me and combine it with a bunch of other stuff. All right, so to kick off the components of an arc, if you take nothing else away from this, then take away these 2 points, which is the lie, a negative belief, and a truth, which is a positive belief, and the fact that the character moves from believing a negative belief to believing a positive belief, or in the case of a negative arc, the other way around. So there are 3 different types of arc. The positive arc is, as I mentioned, the kind of truth overcomes the lie. Negative arc, the lie overcomes the truth. And in a flat arc, actually the truth overcomes everything. So the character themselves doesn't change, but they affect a change in other people. And a good example of that is Norsca of the Valley of the Wind, who believes in humans and nature living in harmony, but the world around her doesn't necessarily have the same view. And so through her actions, she kind of affects change in other people. Alrighty, so there are more components to an arc that follow from on there. So a ghost, which is the reason that the character believes the lie in the first place. It underpins why that lie is such a kind of a strong presence in their life, and a goal for what the character thinks they want. Now, I'm going to use Your Lie in April as an example to really dig into, so that you can really see how character arcs work. But I do need to say that this is a spoiler alert. It is an anime that is 5 years old. I hope that a fair few of you may have seen it yourself and remember it for the tearjerker that it was. But if you haven't seen it and it's like on your to watch list, then look away now and watch this talk on YouTube later or something. All right, so in Your Lie in April, there is a protagonist called ARIMA who doesn't play the piano, but used to play the piano, and Cowdy, a violinist that he meets that kind of causes change to happen in his life. And ARIMA has a whole bunch of different lies and truths that are associated with that, and ghosts, but his ghost mentally is about the fact that his mother died and the way that she treated him leading up to that death, as well as some of the things that he came to believe afterwards. His goal is to never play the piano again. In his arc, the goal doesn't form a really core pillar, but you will find that in some arcs, actually, the goal very much sits hand in hand with the arc, because it drives the character forward. It's something that they aspire to have and or achieve. And then perhaps towards the end of the arc, they may even let it go, right? They might give up the thing that they want in order to have the thing that they truly need when they embrace the truth. Right, so I'm going to try and summarize to you 7 hours worth of anime very rapidly. But what I'd like you to focus on is try and pick up on the bits where you think, okay, this is the kind of the lie of ARIMA being in play here. This is the truth that's in play here, and see if you can kind of walk along with the journey and really notice the character arc that he's going on. So ARIMA starts off as a boy who has been taught by his mother to play like a metronome, like a robot, without feeling, completely precisely on the piano. And when his mother dies, he loses the ability to hear his own notes and he stops playing altogether. 2 years later, he meets Kaori, who is a passionate violinist, and she plays at this concert that he happens to observe with a huge amount of feeling, and it's really inspiring. He just realizes how beautiful she is when she is on stage, and he's completely enamored with that performance. That doesn't make him want to play the piano, however, but she drags him on stage with her by forcing him to be her accompanist, something that he resists, eventually capitulates to. And when he is on stage, he's making loads of mistakes. It's not going at all to plan. But towards the second half of their performance, he is swept up in her passion, and they give an amazing performance that the people there will never forget. So despite the fact that it was not a perfect performance, it was nonetheless an unforgettable one. Next, she signs him up for a competition. And once again, he cannot hear the notes, and he is confronted with the phantom of his mother, who tells him that the fact that he can't hear the notes is punishment for rejecting her dream for him to become this kind of metronome of a pianist. But he remembers Kaori and how he feels about her during this performance. And then his feelings for Kaori flow into the piano, and he expresses his feelings for her, on stage, and his feelings reach her. Not only do they reach Kaori, but also at that moment, the phantom of his mother begins to smile. Next, ARIMA starts to work towards actually becoming a pianist. He's working towards doing a performance together with Kaori. And it's a piece that means a lot to him because it's a piece that his mother used to play for him. And when he is there on stage, once again, he can't hear the notes, but he realizes that he's banging the keys in a way that his mother never played, because the way his mother played it, it was a lullaby to him. And he realizes that the ghost of his mother was actually a shadow of his own creation. He was using it almost like an excuse. And his memories of his mother become much more fond, much more warm, of all the nice times when they had a loving experience together. And finally, he plays this melody as a goodbye to his mother, and her ghost, her sort of phantom, fades away. Unfortunately, things are not completely finished for him there because Kaori ends up in hospital, and this reminds ARIMA of his mother, who herself was also in and out of hospital before she died. And they promise each other that they're going to perform together one more time. He is spurred into action. He's now wanting to become a pianist. He's studying for kind of like a competition, which is the equivalent of doing an entrance exam for the school that he wants to end up in. And things seem to be going well until Kaori ends up in intensive care. And this is where ARIMA realizes that she may well die. And he cannot go on. He gives up. He can't play the piano. And he sees her after she comes out of intensive care, because he feels like music has killed everyone that he's ever loved. He's lost everyone that he's ever loved through music. and that he is all alone. But when he goes to see her, she tells him, "You exist inside me." And he realizes that she exists inside him as well. And that their shared memories are things that, will continue to exist within each other. She goes under for an operation at the same time as that he goes up on stage to perform for this competition. He really struggles with his feelings, but as he plays, he realizes, or he sort of reinforces the fact that all the sounds that he is playing are coming from this wealth of feeling. He is not alone. These are the sounds that his mother gave him. These are the sounds that his friends gave him, his teachers gave him, and of course, Cowdy too. And she appears in spirit as he's playing, and they have their final duet together. And at the end of the duet, she fades away and passes away. The anime finishes when ARIMA reminisces peacefully about the fact that spring is about to arrive, and he met her in spring, and now he is facing a spring without her. And that completes his arc. Okay. So I don't know about you guys. I still find it really emotional when I go through that. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's like character arcs have this huge power to create emotion within us. But if we look at the actual structure of that, and I hope you noticed how the lies and the truth sort of flowed over the course of that, broadly speaking, there's sort of like a first half, which is a reactive half, where the protagonist is fully in the sway of the lie. They encounter the truth. They're still believing more in the lie, and they try to overcome challenges using it. And things come flying at them, and they're just reacting to the things that are coming there. But there comes a point where they have a mirror moment. And in that mirror moment, it's like truth and lie are about 50-50, and they flip from believing one into the other, but they've not fully let go of the lie. That comes in the second half. The second half is more proactive. That's where they demonstrate that actually they do believe the truth, and they can use the truth, and they start using the truth more confidently until the dark moment or the worst moment, whatever you want to call it, where the lie kicks back super hard, like as hard as it can. And they have every opportunity to just give up on the truth, but they don't, and they overcome that lie using the truth. Just to go a little bit deeper into the mirror moment. Here's a quote from September C. Fawkes. The protagonist has to have a heart-to-heart with himself, where he is forced to look at himself in the mirror, so to speak, and reflect on who he is and who he needs to become. This is quite often actually, funny enough, literally it can be a mirror or like a reflection in the water or something like that. It happens more often than you think, but of course it doesn't have to be. And if you find that your stories are kind of lacking in the middle part, or you're not sure how to really land an emotional beat right there in the middle, I really recommend reading James Scott Bell, Write Your Novel from the Middle, because he's sort of, I don't know, he's like really good at really centering in on that moment. What I thought was interesting is that in the anime, there is really this very clear moment where the truth and the lie flip, where the mother is the phantom to turning into the mother that loves him. Now, for the worst moment, this is where the protagonist faces the ultimate temptation of the lie. The truth is tested to its very limit. The worst possible thing happens. And I think the worst moment is almost like the defining part. You know, it's part of the climax of a character arc. So it is quite important to think about what is the worst thing that could happen to this character, and give enough build up to that. All right, and then one final component to an arc that is not inherent in the arc itself, but I think arcs tie into the theme of your story. And so if you have multiple characters that have multiple arcs, often the theme will be a part that's there. And I like to put it down like at the top. So I'll have like theme, let's say if it's very broadly theme friendship or something like that, or in this case, theme bereavement, or theme memories allow us to stay connected with people that have passed away. Then that's something that will be echoed through multiple of the arcs of the different characters in a story. All right, so then there's 3 different types of arc. Just to go back to that, now that you've digested that a little bit. We've done the positive arc. The negative arc I'll go into in a moment. I just want to center again on the flat arc, the fact that there is no lie there as such. The lie exists in the people around the character. But also sometimes you find like flat arcs might be quite good for side characters. Sometimes the side character doesn't need to be someone who is changed, but they might be someone who affects change in your protagonist, for example. So you can play with these 3 different types. For the negative arc, it's almost the same as the positive arc. The key difference, I think, is that moment that is the dark moment in the positive arc. Here it is a clear opportunity to use the truth. So if you think of Darth Vader has a clear opportunity to turn to the light side, but decides themselves to turn away and turn to the dark side. So they fully embraced the lie at that moment, even though they had all the opportunity in the world to actually turn to the truth. But no, they don't. And negative arcs are great for villains. They're also good for, sort of like tragic characters and stuff like that, but in a sort of very simple sense. Your villains should use negative arcs, maybe. All right, so we're coming to using arcs, and this is the serious end of the, not so serious, which, by the way, is a very old meme, so forgive me, please forgive me, I'm old. All right, so tip 1, character cheat sheet. I've got 5 tips for you about using and applying character arcs in your stories and visual novels. If you're like me, you will write a big background, backstory, etc., etc. I find it really difficult to access that at a glance when I'm writing. So what I find really helpful is to have a little character cheat sheet where I just literally write down theme, lie, truth, goal, ghost. And this is something that I reference throughout. And that's because the wording can be really important. So for example, if Alice's lie is, I'm only worth as much as the money I make, then if I start writing a story, I might think, oh yeah, she just wants to make money. And then I lose maybe some of the nuances there. Because if you look at it, her truth is true friends value each other, whether they're rich or poor. So actually that word worth and value is really important for Alice's story. And here's an example of a flat arc for a side character. I didn't even list a lie there because it being a side character, if it was a protagonist, I would list the lie that the world believes. So that's for a character cheat sheet. Tip 2, how to structure without plot, because that's something I mentioned earlier. I struggle with plot. It sucks the life out of my stories, but I have not failed to find a way to structure my stories. So broadly speaking, it's like a paragraph for the first half, the mirror moment, and the second half. It can be a bit longer if if you're writing a really sort of epic tale. But this is Alice's one broken up. In the first half, she is put in a poor position near the palace because she's punished by the king. Brim is kind to her despite her low status, but she tries to continue to accrue and solve problems with money. In her mirror moment, an old friend of Alice, who only cares about her money, doesn't help her, but Brim does, and she realizes that money does not buy true friendship. Her friend belittles her for being poor, but Alice defends herself by describing other things of value about herself, and as a result, reflecting on her journey. So if I just go back to Alice's arc, remember I mentioned that value is really important. That is if somebody says you are only worth as much as the money you make, you're worth nothing because you're poor now, her being able to say, actually, I am worth something, there are lots of things of value about me. That is a clear moment of her rejecting the lie that she used to believe. And then for the second half, I don't know if we have time for it. Yes, I think we do have time. I would love for you guys to come up with some suggestions for your second half, for what you think Alice what her worst moment might be. So if you think the theme is friendship, a little bit about her character, what would be the very worst thing that could happen to Alice? Let's see if we get anything in the chat. Or maybe I'll let you guys think about it while I do the next bit. Oh, argue with her own true friend. Nice one. Yes, I like that. She forgets her wallet. Oh, yeah. or lose her wallet, forgets her wallet, but her wallet is at like the friend's house or something like that. All right. So how I would break that up then further would be into scenes, and you can do more or less scenes, but this is just an example of 7 scenes. So we have the initial scene where the character is introduced as well as the problem that they face. The second scene is the first glimpse of truth, which is she meets Brim. The third scene is a scene where she fails to solve a problem with money. There's a mirror moment where the friend betrays her. The next scene is where she solves that problem that her friend betrayed her about with Brim. Then there's the worst moment. Let's have a look. We got any more? Alice loses tons of money, but is accepted to an important meeting because of her knowledge. There you go. That's her worst moment. And then there's a happy conclusion where she gets through the meeting without a hitch, despite the fact that she has no money whatsoever. Okay, so that would be a structure. It's not a plot-based hero's journey or whatever different methods there, and there's loads of methods out there. It's very loose. I'm not prescribing myself any specific detail about the story, very loose ones. This allows me to have the freedom and creativity to write into those scenes with that same joy and freedom that I feel when I start writing a story from nothing. That just works for me. Like, might not be for you, but yeah. Character arcs are surprisingly flexible, which brings me on to the third tip, which is that they're really easy to scope. As you can see, I've just inserted another 2 scenes in there, no problem, and you can insert even more. The most important thing is to bear in mind where in that first half they are. So if you're like 10% through into the first half, then you're probably mostly still in the swing of the lie and not very much of the truth. Whereas if you're like after the midpoint, then the truth is kind of being tried out a lot more and the lie holds less sway. And you can kind of tailor, you know, as you look at the truth and the lie and the theme, you can probably come up with lots of scenes that will reflect that point in the journey in the character. And similarly, actually, often you can remove scenes if you need to, like if you need to downscope. All right, tip 4 is flat arcs for blank protagonists. I know a lot of people like blank protagonists, so this is just my tip. Of course, you can't create positive and negative arcs for blank protagonist characters, or generally speaking, because they require the protagonist to have a strong belief of some kind right at the beginning of the story. There's probably ways in which you could do that, you know, with like allowing the player to choose what their lie is or something like that. But you know, we're talking about sensible scope here. But what they can do is they can affect change in their allies, their love interests, the villagers, the, you know, whatever other characters there are in your story. And this is something that you probably see a lot of games do, right? So like in Otome games, quite often the protagonist affects change in the love interests, but it can also work the other way around, where the protagonist goes through several different arcs, depending on like positive arcs, depending on which character they're paired up with. So just something to bear in mind. And then my final tip is about the size of your arcs. So if you look at this really simple lie and truth, ARIMA is like a kid brother versus I'm in love with ARIMA. It wouldn't take much for a person to move from their initial belief to their truth. Like maybe a love letter or seeing ARIMA fall in love with someone else might make them realize this. So it doesn't require a lot of sort of time and effort to get from state A to state B. But if you compare it to this, I want to see the world burn, I hate everyone, everybody must die, to the truth of I love everyone, everybody's wonderful, they're so amazing. You wouldn't do that if somebody like sent you a letter saying I will make toast for you tomorrow or something. They're like, oh my God, now I love everyone, you know. Like that just doesn't happen, right? So you need to think about how big your arc is and kind of match your story to that, because time and gradual change will charge your arc with feeling, and that applies whether it's a big or a small arc. So in the example where I had with the kid brother versus I'm in love with them, this is actually an arc in Your Lie in April, but it is done really gradually over time, so it lands more strongly than if it was done over a shorter span of time. An arc that's delivered too quickly won't land the feels. So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. There's probably ways in which, maybe if you're some sort of wordsmith, you might be able to land a powerful arc in a very short space of time. But just keep an eye out in case it falls flat. No pun intended. All right, thank you so much. That was me. I'm Nina Roussakoff, founder and game director of Lovewish. You can follow me on Twitter, SteamGoGame. And if you're interested in a card battler otome game, then follow Lovewish Games on Twitter, because that's our company and that's what we're working on. That's everything. Thank you so much. And oh my God, I've run out of time. So yeah.
That was fine. You're perfectly on time. That's all right. I'm just going to take the decision. We're going to bump everything 5 minutes later, so we have 5 minutes of Q&A like you're supposed to. And so I'm going to monitor. All right, so people put your questions into chat, either Discord or I guess the main the Zoom one, and I will read them out as best I can. Hopefully I don't miss any, and then see what happens. All right, so questions, people. Tabby is asking, what was the name of the book?
Yes, I'll see if I can get back to that one. K.M. Weiland, Creating Character Arcs. You can also find a lot of the content of the book in online if you search the name. I think it's like something like Helping Writers Become Authors or something like that is the website. And a lot of the articles there will also go into it.
Any other questions, people? Do you have any insights, tips on one character having multiple arcs?
Ooh, an interesting one. Okay, so Your Lie in April, the protagonist has the 3 lies and the 3 truths. And the way I plotted, I did actually plot that out, but it wasn't enough, made my talk too bloated. So you can do that in lots of different ways, right? So you can have a character sequentially overcome one truth and one lie with a truth and then another one. So if you think of like ReZero, the Subaru, if you look at his backstory, his ghost, and analyze that, it's actually a negative arc. So he goes through a negative arc in the past, and then where the story starts, he starts off from a positive arc. But theoretically, there's nothing stopping you from giving the character a negative arc and then a positive arc after that. They can also overlap, or sort of you can have a bigger arc that in ARIMA's case, it was like he goes from believing that he's cursed to being loved is like the big arc. But within that, there's the smaller arc of believing that you should play like a metronome versus playing with feeling. And that's resolved really early on in the story. And then there's a second arc later on where he believes he's all alone versus being together with people. And I'd say like they sit under the bigger arc, if that makes sense. So yeah, there's lots of ways to go about that. Hope that answers the question.
Cool. All right, we have one where someone's asking, what are some of your favorite character arcs that weren't mentioned?
Oh my God, that is such a difficult question. I was like racking my brain for good character arcs to use as an example. Basically, anytime that you feel like you're crying because something's happening to a character, it pretty much is guaranteed to be an amazing character arc. But one that comes to mind is Shawshank Redemption. I think that's one of the best flat arcs ever.
And then someone's asking for if you have a VN that's episodic, right? And there's leading characters. In terms of structuring the character arcs, how do you do things? How do you structure things so that it doesn't feel too rushed? Like, what would be your approach to that?
Okay, yeah, very interesting question. So obviously, without knowing the details of how many episodes and like what the overall plan is, what is quite common is to have a couple of big strong arcs for characters and then having more characters that have just smaller arcs. And what you could do like with an episode is you could have a minor character's arc per episode while the three main characters that you've picked have their bigger arcs play out over longer episodes. And it's really about charting where they are in that journey. Like if you figure out in which episode the mirror moment happens, then all of the moments leading up to that point can just be a build-up of the character, you know, using the lie, learning the truth, using the lie, learning the truth. If you can hold out that long. Like if you think of like ReZero is one of the longest periods of someone holding on to their lie that I've seen in anime. It was like a really long time before he had that moment, you know, the scene with is it Tsubaki? No, I can't remember what the girl's name was. You know which one I mean. Do you know, Agi?
All right, well, we are at time. I know there's a couple more questions that you can definitely answer them in the Discord chat. Meanwhile, I think Maxi, you're up.